Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Connor Campobasso with Palm Beach TPA. I'm joined here with Jason Price as well as Maya Williams from FDOT. And today we'll be going over the 2022 funding program workshop. So kicking it off, so there's actually 3 funding programs this year. In the past, there's only really been 2. So there was traditionally the local initiatives as well as the transportation alternatives. But this year we are formally introducing the State Road Modifications program. And these 3 programs, they all tie back into our long-range transportation plan, and they all seek to accomplish the 5 goals that were established with that plan, which was to preserve as well as to provide safe, efficient, connected, as well as multimodal systems. They also tie back into our new Vision Zero Action Plan, which was established in 2019, but actually received an update this month. So the TPA Governing Board adopted a target of 0 traffic-related fatalities as well as serious injuries. And the SRM, LI, and TA programs utilize different metrics to help see that vision come true. Additionally, if you are interested in applying for either TA or even potentially LI and are seeking to do a LAP project, it's important that you have an established ADA transition plan. So if you do not have that and you are seeking a LAP project, please visit the TPA's website at palmbeachtpa.org/ADA, as well as reach out to our public relations director, Melissa Murray, and she'll be able to direct you with some more information on that. So I did want to highlight some key dates here. Right now we're obviously hosting the workshop, but after this we'll be starting our one-on-one pre-application meetings, and those will be held from November 1st to January 31st. And those are required in order to submit an application. So if you are thinking about submitting one, please meet with us as soon as possible, and we'll be able to schedule something with you and then start the coordination there. So after those pre-application meetings, we'll have our application deadline. That will be February 18th, 2022. As the applications move forward, you'll be receiving some update emails. So the first email you should be receiving around March 25th. And then the second email is going to be April 22nd, 2022. And then finally, the governing board resolutions will be due April 29th, 2022. And also, actually, going back to this, if you do want to see the full list, each of the program overviews will have a full list of the schedule in there with all the updated dates on that. So if you are interested, I encourage you to take a look at that. So the next couple of slides, I'll be going through the 3 different programs and kind of comparing and contrasting them together. What's important to remember is all 3 of these programs, they do tend to fund similar transportation enhancements, but they do it through different modes. So with the State Road Modifications program, it is mainly focused on the state roadways, whereas local initiatives tends to focus on county and city roadways. And then the Transportation Alternatives program, which is one of our more flexible programs, can be utilized on a variety of different roadways as well as even off-road facilities. The funding sources for each, the State Road Modifications program uses state DDR funds, whereas the local initiatives and transportation alternatives use a source of STBG funds. The funding availability for SRM as well as the LI program is about $20 million, with the TA at about $3.3 million. And then there is some links provided in the presentation backup that you can follow if you're interested in those funding sources. This is just a list of different eligible items that you can apply for through the variety of different programs. I won't read through them all today, but they are there for your backup and for some information. But I do encourage you, if you are interested in applying through either of these programs, do take a look at that, the funding program overview. They'll have a full list of different eligible items that you can apply for, as well as I encourage you to meet with us as well. Even if you aren't planning on submitting an application this year, meet with us anyway, and we can help you walk through the different scope items that you can apply for and which program would be best for that project that you're thinking about. And the final slide on the program overviews, I just wanted to give a quick funding breakdown. So for both SRM and LI, they have a funding cap of about $5 million, and the Transportation Alternatives program at $1 million. And the minimum reimbursement is $500,000 for state road modifications, and for LI and TA, it is $250,000. The design years for State road modifications is going to be fiscal year 2027. Local initiatives is 25, and then transportation alternatives is 23. And the construction years are 2 years after that for each program. This is a list of the required application documentation. So first, you'll need the actual application itself, and that's available on the TPA's website. You'll need to provide a location map as well as typical sections for both existing and proposed typical sections, as well as the right-of-way ownership verification documents. With the application, you'll also need to provide a resolution of support from the facility owners and or the local jurisdictional owner. And this will be allowing and committing to fund ongoing and operation maintenance for the project. And what's important is if you are submitting on a state road, to coordinate with FDOT as early as possible, because you'll need some form of support from them to do any kind of construction projects on the state roadway system. In addition to those documents, you'll also need a detailed cost estimate spreadsheet. There are 2 different types. So depending if you're going to be doing a lap project or if DOT is going to be constructing the project. And you'll kind of find that out, well, you may know already, or you may find out during the pre-application meetings as well, but we'll go over that with you in those meetings too. In addition to that, you'll need a commitment letter from the administering agencies, Public Works or Engineering Department to administer and construct a project if funded by the TPA. This one doesn't apply to SRM since with SRM, the idea is that DOT would be designing and constructing the project, so that doesn't really apply to SRM. Finally, photographs of the project location before construction, and then letters of support from the public. And with that, I'll pass it over to Jason.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So now I'm going to go through the application walkthrough process of submitting an application. So to begin, you would navigate to our website, and at our website, you'll see how to apply for a project. When you click on how to apply for a project, there'll be a list of resources that you would then download. And as you saw from the previous list, let's see if I can go back. This required document list, there's a upload portal to attach a file for almost all of these categories. So what I'm going to do right now is walk through each one of these requirements and how to upload them. So the first is the actual applications. When you go to our website, you would download the application for this year, which is 2022. It's updated for this year. Complete that. It's a PDF. It's fillable. So you would fill out all of that information, sign it at the end, print it out to hard code the signature, or use the electronic signature function in the PDF, and then upload that for the application. Now for a project, in terms of some of the categories on the actual application, in terms of project implementation, there's a couple of different boxes that you can check on how you're planning on constructing or implementing the project. And the first one, applicant design the applicant designs and constructs the project off the state highway. And there's 2 ways to do that. That's through the LAP process, which is working directly with FDOT, becoming a LAP certified agency, and then designing and constructing the project on your own as a local applicant. The other is the FTA, and that's for transit folks only, which is Tri-Rail and SFRTA. Tri-Rail is SFRTA and Palm Tran. So both of those would be following that process. And then the other ones, and this is only for local initiatives subject to FDOT approval, and that's working directly with them to become LAP certified and to have FDOT implement the project for you. And that's working well in advance of FDOT to get their commitment to design and construct the project for you. The other one, as I mentioned, was transit projects, and that's flexing the funds that we offer to FTA through this flex program to purchase usually capital or something to do with transit. And there's only a few applicants which are listed here, Tri-Rail and Palm-Tran. Now for state road modifications, because they are on the state roadway, they are implemented with some restrictions in terms of you wouldn't be a lap certified organization to implement projects on the state highway. It would likely go through the FDOT and you would work through them directly. And we've now formalized the process for state road modifications where there's a state road modification application on our website, and you would follow the links and the process similar to LI and TA of filling out the application, uploading all of the submittal requirements similar to LI and TA, scheduling the pre-application meeting. And then when you sit down with us one-on-one, FDOT will be a part of that process and we'll kind of go through vetting the process preliminarily through the pre-application meeting, and then kind of giving the proper direction on how best to apply and kind of scoping the project as a state road modification project. Now with that, that concludes the application section of completing the application, figuring out which program you want to target, and then kind of what boxes to check on implementation strategy. The next part is some of the supporting documentation. And this first one is the aerial map. And that just gives you a good overview of the limits of the project. And we're recommending using, you can use Google Earth, but you can also use the Palm Beach TPA.org map. We have an aerial map function on there that you can kind of use as a screenshot to draw out the limits of your project. You can also use Palm Beach County has a pretty good map with a lot of content on it as well. It's My GeoNav. So if you can Google search Palm Beach County GeoNav, GeoNav, and it'll bring you pretty close to the link to where you could click on it and check out all of the content that they provide on their website. And one of them is an aerial map and some right-of-way. There's some right-of-way layers as well that you can click on, so you can kind of identify where your project is and where it sits within the right-of-way. Next is a typical section or a cross section of the proposed facility and the existing facility. The typical section should include what's on the roadway today, what does it look like today in terms of the cross section and the layout of the roadway, and then how do you propose to change it with potential improvements. And there's a good website to use, streetmix.net. This is a free application that we use pretty heavily to kind of show existing and proposed changes. It's a free website and it's pretty easy to use to type in all of the right-of-way of the roadway, the lane widths of the roadway, adding the different attributes to the roadway in terms of sidewalks, bike lanes, or buffers, and then including the potential improvements to show how it would change, how the right-of-ways would change for the roadways and just the distribution of the right-of-way. In addition to the typical section, right-of-way verification is also required, and that just indicates the project you're proposing is within currently owned right-of-way of the municipality. Right-of-way acquisition isn't allowed as part of the application. You should own all of the right-of-way to where the proposed application is would be implemented. So this requirement, the right-of-way verification, just indicates that the project can be built within the existing right-of-way. And to provide this documentation, you can also use the Palm Beach County website, the GeoNav website, but they also have one here, and it's Palm Beach County pbcgov.com, and then you see there's a few PZB/PZB maps, plats, and then plat index. But if you go on our website, you'll also see this link as well for the right-of-way. So just clicking on that, you can kind of navigate to or search for your project and get the actual right-of-way maps. And then you could kind of pencil in where your proposed project is or highlight the right-of-way where the project is within to show that it's within the right-of-way. The next item is some resolutions that are required depending on how the project will be implemented. We are asking for a resolution from the governing board where the project is located. So they're in agreement and that they support the project. And depending on the facility owner, getting a resolution of support from the owner of the facility that they're in support of constructing the project as it's scoped in the application, as well as support from FDOT to administer or construct the project if they are in fact the lead and it's not a lap project and you're asking FDOT to construct it on your behalf. And these are all due by April 29th, 2022. So although the application deadline is in February, a few months after that, in April 29th, the resolutions will be due because we're giving that extra time to kind of vet the project, ensure that it's implementable and constructible, and then going to the municipality's governing board to get the resolutions after kind of going through that process. There's also a commitment letter from the Engineering and Public Works Department for the administering agency, basically getting their commitment to maintain the project as it's scoped and constructed. Lastly, there's cost estimates that are also a part of and required as part of the application submittal process. And there's two different cost estimates to fill out depending on how you're going to implement the project. One is on the state highway, one is off the state highway for if it's either and if it's a lap project or not. And so there's two different cost estimates. I will pull them up and show some of the differences because there is two categories to be mindful of, and that's participating cost and non-participating cost. And so let's see. At this point, we'll pull those up now. This one now? No, it's online. Okay. All right. Awesome. So this one you can see at the top, it says use for off-road system projects only administered through LAP. And you would always see this for transportation alternative projects. Those are all projects that are administered by locals, and it's required to use this particular cost estimate sheet because it would be administered through the LAP program. The other two grant programs would be non-LAP cost estimates, but just scrolling down here, because I believe it's probably all the same. When you scroll down to the bottom, you see that there's two sections here, I think. Is there participating and non-participating? Is that okay? So you can see the two categories that are highlighted that are kind of sectioned out as part of the cost estimate, and you see participating and non-participating. And so the non-participating items are what's covered by local funds, and the participating funds is what's covered by the grant program. When you complete the application, the cost estimate, if you're not sure, you can put it in participating costs, and then through the vetting process, if it's found to not be participating, through the vetting process, we'll be able to kind of sort that out and get the accurate amounts and categories for each one of the pay items that you list on the cost estimate. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things is, although there is a maximum of $5 million to apply for, you can exceed that amount in the participating column, because once we go through the process, if it becomes non-participating, it'll move over to that category. So you don't want to shortchange yourself and kind of account for up to 5 million in participating if some of those items were to fall out and move into non-participating, or a portion of them are. You don't have to limit yourself to the $5 million cap for local initiatives. And so with the other application, with the other cost estimate, you'll see that it looks fairly similar to that. There might be a few items that are different on the bottom because it is being administered differently. It's not through the LAP program. It would be through DOT. So it might look slightly different, but for the most part, there's still the same categories of participating and non-participating. But if there's any questions throughout that process of downloading these particular documents, if there's any questions on them, you could reach out to one of us, one of the grant managers, which would be Connor for SRM, myself for local initiatives, and Alyssa for transportation alternatives. And we could get answers for you on in terms of completing the cost estimate sheets correctly and which ones to use. So that covers the cost estimate component. So as a reference, as I go through all of the required documentation to submit an application, know that you can always refer back to the program overview, and the program overview will give you all of the information you need to know what kind of projects are eligible. And there's a checklist of all of the items that are required to submit an application. And so what I'm going through now is just all of those required pieces to submit as part of a completed application. And one of the last things after the cost estimate is photographs of the existing conditions. And then once the project is completed, completed photos of the completed work. And this could be easily done through either Google Street View or just getting out on the roadway. We do have a public relations team that's actively out there collecting photos of before and after. And so it's good to submit some Google Street View photos, but we are looking to try and get some similar photos on the ground of the existing roadway before construction, physically out there and capturing a couple photos of at a good angle. So that way, when the project is complete, we can capture something in the same location to give a good comparison of the type of improvement that's out there and how it's changed the landscape after implementation of the project. And now, one of the things that I put together was an online interactive map specifically for the three grant programs, and that's a interactive scoring map. I created this just so you could get an idea when you go through the scoring sheet. There's points associated with each one of the categories for us to come up with a score for each of the projects, and you can do that by using this interactive map of seeing where your project falls. If it meets some of the categories, this is a good way to identify what types of scoring or what kind of score you would get for each one of these elements by utilizing this map. So if you have multiple projects and you wanted to kind of get a rough estimate of a score for each one of them, you could utilize this map and kind of pencil out a rough score for yourself. So right now we'll navigate to the map just to show you how to kind of get into the map. So right from here, you go from the top, you can go from LITA or SRM. And when you scroll down, you'll see that there's a link that says interactive maps. This one is for local initiatives. It's local initiatives interactive map. When you click on the link will take you to the interactive map. And from here, you could see on this, on the side, there's the table of content with all of the layers that are associated with something, with one of the categories within the scoring. So within that scoring, I'll highlight one thing that has changed and was consolidated is the traditionally underserved index. The traditionally underserved index is new for this year, in that there was a traditionally underserved and a low income category. There was two separate categories that are now combined into one. And this is that new layer on our interactive map. So you could scroll into this area, you could scroll in and look to see, does your project fit within one of these categories? And look at the table of contents on the left that says medium, high, and very high. And those particular categories are associated with a score on the scoring map. And if your project is within one of those areas, then you would be able to assign that score to your application for those particular, for your project. So on the left, you can click on any one of those categories to get an idea of where your project fits within them and kind of tally up a score. But it's a resource for you to use if you want to get if you want to find out what you would score in particular categories. And that's it for the scoring map.
All right, so continuing on with the scoring. Oh, might have to. There we go. Okay. So we wanted to provide sort of a visual breakdown of the different scoring criteria between the three different programs. Again, in the overview for each program, there'll be a detailed list of what category gets assigned what kind of point value. But just to kind of compare and contrast the different programs here. So for instance, for LI and for the State Road Modifications program, you can see that there is a vehicular facilities category, whereas the TA, there's no category. It's given more weight to the Vision Zero action plan in that instance. So you can kind of see that broken down visually, but we did just want to provide that so you can kind of get a better idea of what the different scoring systems looked like. So once you have created all the documentation that you need and you've done the public outreach and you've gone through the website and collected all the documents, there is some steps to actually submit the application. So again, once you've downloaded the application cost estimates and you've filled those out, again, there's some supporting examples of different documents if you are interested in that. You then submit the documents through the online link. Each program will have a separate link for that. And then you can fill out the online scoring after that, and staff will be in contact to clarify any answers or confirm the document submittal with you. We do want to provide some resources. Jason actually provided quite a few good ones. The GeoNav is a great resource, but when building the application itself, you can always consult our Complete Streets Design Guidelines, as well as our Vision Zero Action Plan. In addition to that, you can take a look at our long-range transportation plan and our interactive map, which Jason did a preview of as well. And also another resource is us. So if you have any questions or you're interested in submitting a project, but you're not sure which program to submit it through or whether you are allowed to submit through any of the programs, just reach out to us anyway. You can reach out to any of us depending on if you don't know which program to submit through. But if you have a good idea, you can reach out to the individual program manager. So with that, I'll be passing it over to Maya Williams with DOT. Maya.
Good morning, everyone. I am Maya Williams Gray. I am the District 4 FDOT District 4 Local Program Administrator, managing the state and federal grant programs. I also oversee the district's transportation alternative program vetting and application cycle, in addition to certifying local agencies to administrate transportation projects and facilitate local program training. So you heard LAP throughout Jason and Connor's presentation this morning, but what does LAP stand for? LAP is the local agency program, and it is a reimbursement program. So the department is the steward of the federal funds and is responsible for the oversight and the funding of the projects on behalf of Federal Highway Administration. It's important to note that any governmental entity other than the Department of Transportation who intends to administer a federal aid project must seek LAP certification. So private corporations, those of you that are part of consultant firms or just individuals, nonprofit organizations, or even subunits within a governmental entity, you're not eligible for certification. The department uses this certification process to determine whether a local agency is qualified to administer a federal aid project. There are two certification options that you see here. One is the full certification, which is a 3-year term that is reserved for county government. Then there's the project-specific certification. This is the certification that our cities and towns and villages will receive, and it will be renewed for every project, every new project that enters the 5-year work program. And under both certifications, the department will monitor the projects. So there's project monitoring and oversight that will occur from the implementation of the project to close out. So what do we certify agencies to do? We certify you in the functional areas of design. So that's preparation of the plans, specs, and estimates package, as well as the construction and construction administration. We also certify in 2 procurement methods, professional services, and construction contracts. The certification is a multi-step process in which the department will examine or assess a local agency to determine whether or not they are eligible for certification. It helps us gauge their internal controls. We will, during this process, the local agency will have to demonstrate its ability to comply with the certification requirements, which includes but not limited to Title VI compliance, ADA, grant management, procurement, and construction administration. If a local agency is not eligible for LAP certification, they can request the county to administer on their behalf. But proper coordination must take place, and coordination must take place before submitting your application through the TPA. So we ask that any agency that has that is unaware of their status or have questions about the certification process, we ask that you contact our office, because early coordination is critical in this process. So again, here's just a little snippet of our certification process. The certification typically starts when a project has been included has been awarded through your planning organization. There will be initial documentation that's returned to the department, in which we will assess the local agency's risks. There's risk assessments done at our central office level, which is our headquarters in Tallahassee, as well as at the district level, before we're able to certify an agency. So again, if an agency has concerns about their certification status or their eligibility, I encourage them to contact me directly. Here's some resources for you all to learn more about the local agency program, as well as LAP certification. There's training available on our websites. What you don't see here is the link to our District 4 local program webpage, but it is accessible from any one of these links here. If you look in the subheader of any of the web pages here, you'll see District 4. And if you click on that link, it'll take you directly to our local program district page, where you can download a lab certification brochure that the department has created. Again, I am your primary point of contact as it relates to lab oversight and lab certification. Your lab coordinator that's assigned for any of the Palm Beach lab projects is Ramon Alvarez. I have his contact information here. And supporting on the supporting side of lab certification is Susan Dale. She's my right hand, and it's particularly in the preliminary reviews or coordination. So I have her contact here for you as well. If you go to our web page, you all can definitely see all of our district contacts on that web link. So please contact my office if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Maya. With that, that is the end of our formal presentation. So we'll open it up into the Q&A section. If you are in person, you can just raise your hand. If you are online, you can either use the raise your hand feature, or there is also a Q&A feature built into Zoom as well, which you can utilize. So with that, thank you again, and we'll again open it up into any questions.
Hey, before we get into the questions, if we could pull up our website, I can give you a quick overview of how to get to all of the information that we covered today on our website. There'll be a few moments, but when our website comes up, I'll kind of navigate to you where to go. So this is our homeland. If you go to palmbeachtpa.org, and then from here, you would navigate to funding. And through funding, you see our 3 funding programs: local initiatives, transportation alternatives, and state road modifications. So if you were to click on one of them, say, local initiatives would work. This will be the page where you'll find specific information for each one of the grant programs. And when you scroll further down, I'll show you where you're going to find the content from today. What I have here, and it's coming, it'll be posted after today, the TPA funding program workshop. That's the information that's held last year, which will be replaced this week for the new information for the workshop presentation slides and the video. So you'll find all of the content that you've heard today on our website. And then just below that, you'll see our program overview and then how to submit an application. So when you click on how to submit an application, that's where I was referencing, where it will take you to another page that will give you all of the resources you need to submit an application. So these are all of the submittal requirements in terms of the local initiatives application form at the top. That's the current application form for this year. You would download that, and then determining how you're going to implement the project, either through LAP or through FDOT. You would use the cost estimate spreadsheets here. And you'll see on the kind of just above that, it says click here to submit a completed application, and highlighted yellow. When you click on that, that is going to actually take you to the portal to submit all of the completed documentation. So just as a reference, if we click on that, just so you can see what it looks like. So at this point, when you click on this, this is when you will fill out some of the basic information for your application. And this page will look similar for transportation alternatives and state road modifications. So no matter what program you choose, these landing pages will look the same, and submittal pages, especially for the portal. This is the basic information. And then when you scroll a little further down, you see the choose file location dialog box there. That's where you'll click on that and upload each one of the pieces of information that are required for a successful application. And just wanted to point out all of the pages that you would utilize for getting the resources you need to complete an application for reference, the supporting documentation to actually complete, and then this particular page of where you would submit everything as a completed application. So if there's any questions on these particular parts, please let me know. We could walk through those or any other questions regarding the overall application process. Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, and actually, while we're going through all this information on the website, I'd like to kind of walk through the overview document because there is basically all the resources you would need regarding the individual programs are in there as well. So, and I can share that online. So this is just the overview document for the local initiatives program. But in here, you can pretty much see a lot of the stuff that we covered today in the PowerPoint slides. So you have the design and construction years in here, as well as the funding amounts, the project eligibility, the eligible applicants, as well as the program requirements. And what I want to show too is the schedule for the program. So right now we're in the workshop, but as you can see, there's quite a lot ahead of us. So we have our pre-application meetings as well as the application deadline. And down below, we also have the resolution support due date. So that's gonna be April 29th as well. And then this will look pretty similar between the different programs. This is the scoring criteria. They may look similar, but there are some small changes between the different programs. So depending on which one you're going to be submitting to is going to depend on the different criteria that we use. So there's some more information here. I won't cover it all. I'll let you look through it on your own, but there is some good information here. So if you are interested, we do recommend going through and taking a look at that.
So one of the first action items as an applicant that you'll notice on the schedule is scheduling a one-on-one meeting with us. So on our website, you'll see when you click on one of the program websites, there'll be a location where you could click on a calendar through Calendly, select the time to book your pre-application meeting. Let's see. It may not be up and active right now, but it will be very shortly. And that'll kick off on November 1st. So we'll have that set up on our calendar. So when you click on one of the programs, you'll be able to select a time and a day. It'll be either 45 minutes or 60 minutes, depending on the time we'll allow for each one of the one-on-one application meetings, and that'll be with FDOT and the TPA and the applicant. So feel free to bring either one or several of your projects so we can go through those projects, give you guidance on each one, or if it's a single project, kind of dive a little deeper into it and answer any questions you might have. But be on the lookout for a Calendly invite link on all three of the grant websites to book a meeting for the pre-application meetings, and that'll be shown on our websites before November 1st when it kind of kicks off, when you can book a meeting.
All right, I think we are gonna open it up into the Q&A section now. So again, if you are in person, just raise your hand. If you are online, there's a raise your hand feature as well as a Q&A section. So you can utilize those if you're on the Zoom platform. And again, if you're in person, you can just raise your hand. So we'll start off over here.
Javi, can you?
Am I on now? I have to get a little closer, but you're good.
Very close. All right. Javier Falcone, City of West Palm Beach. Couple of questions. One is related to the meeting, the pre-application meeting. So what is the expectation of that meeting? You want to see about 30% of the projects, 40%, 50%? I've been in those meetings before where it seems like FTAT is expecting more than just a drawing. So there are questions that are more specific to engineering. as opposed to the planning aspects of the project. So is that the same expectation for these projects now, for these meetings? Thank you.
So there's no expectation on having a certain percentage of plans completed because we're just getting a high level overview of the project of what's the scope of the project, what are the limits of the projects, what are all the details of what are you proposing to do. The more you have completed and kind of sorted out as a plan, the better, because you will be able to provide more guidance and FDOT would have a better idea of all of the elements that you're proposing. So the more you have, the better, but it's no requirement that you have a certain level of plans completed. Because it's a pre-application meeting, you may not necessarily have put a lot of funds or time into developing some plan, 10 to 20% plans. You may have them, but if it's not required, and you'll get through that process through the application process of, you have to come up with some kind of cost estimate. So you'll have to have some idea of what are all the elements that are going to make up the project, and then have some kind of plan to say, this is where all the elements are going to be provided on a plan sheet. But it's not, we haven't nailed down a particular percentage of plans to be completed, but that'll get done through the application process.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Can I ask another? The public engagement process, I know that that's part of this application process, but at what point in time do you need to see a good public engagement process in relation to acceptance from the people who are near the project for the project?
Right. So we typically like the public outreach to be done prior to the application submittal. So that's in a couple months. So by February, mid-February, you should have already completed the public outreach, or at least have plans to get out to do some type of public outreach to gain support for the project. And the public outreach is specific to, there's specific requirements in the program overview that outline what public outreach is required, which is projects that have residential units immediately adjacent to the project where that's their primary access to a single family unit. So those are the requirements. So when you're looking at a project, if it's on a residential road or any road that has single family residents immediately adjacent to the project, and this project is going to impact their primary point of entry into that residence, those are the residents that we're primarily targeting, because the project will have the most direct impact on those residents, because we're interrupting their primary access. They could have two access points to their property, but the primary one, which could be identified by just looking at their driveways and how they primarily access the property, that's how you would indicate which driveway, if there was multiple, and then if the project is immediately adjacent to it, those are the residents that should be primarily targeted for public outreach and getting their indication of accepting or not of the project. So, and the public outreach could take the shape of many different types. It could be a public outreach meeting in the vicinity of the project. It could be mail outs, flyers. It could be, something that you mail out and they return, or you could be on the streets and go door to door, door flyers or door hangers. So there's a variety of different ways to approach the public outreach piece. And then setting up the one-on-one pre-application meeting, we can go over it a little further if you haven't already completed the public outreach, and give us a sense of what your plan is to do the public outreach if it hasn't already been completed. Or reach out to us earlier to get more information. Sometimes applicants will reach out to get specific wording on what does the public outreach need to say about the project. Because the more you say, the better, in terms of, this is the scope of the project, this is how it'll impact the neighborhood or the residential street that you're proposing it on, just to give full disclosure to the applicant or to the residents of the type of work that's going to be implemented on their street. Does that answer the question, or you have a follow-up?
A lot of questions
Sure.
came as a result of your talking. So one of the questions that came up is that the catch-22 here is that we have, as a city, we're looking at submitting, having a meeting with the TPA and the DOT to talk about the project, maybe at 30% stage, assuming that. So basically, it's a set of drawings or a couple, just one drawing and a map and some cost estimate draft and all that stuff. So when from there until the time we go to the application submittal, we got to have a public outreach process, and it's difficult to take that to the public and gain acceptance when people don't really know. I've been in meetings where presentation has gone through, and actually they have been pretty well established, the parameters of the project. And I think even then people said, well, when are you going to get this done? You know, what are the details? How is that going to affect my driveway? You know, how is it going to affect my access to the street? And those details at that level, they are not quite completely ironed out. So that's what I struggle when you talk about the public engagement process, you know, prior to the submittal of the application. So it's a catch-22. I know I was engaged with TPA before, and there was extensive discussion as a TAC, and what I remember. And so I don't know. We'll just follow your rules, but I just want to express, you know.
Yeah. Well, usually the challenge is identifying who do we need to do public outreach for. We've kind of narrowed that down to identifying specifically who you should be reaching out to. And in terms of explaining what type of elements, you know, what kind of disruptions to expect, hopefully it's clear enough to know that putting in a sidewalk or converting a sidewalk to a shared use path and saying increasing its width to something wider that would obstruct their driveway or whatever it is, that should be pretty well sorted out to where you're at least able to articulate, this is the type of facility we want to construct. So we anticipate this type of disruption, or this is the improvement, and this is how it would it would abut your property. And then just getting a sense of approval or acceptance along those lines. And what kind of landscaping might be lost as a part of the right of way. Because if it's not, sometimes it's the addition of something that's not currently there, like a sidewalk, which means taking out somebody's landscaping of some sort, if in the example of a sidewalk. So hopefully that is pretty well scoped out in the project, so you could identify and articulate that to a resident of, this is the type of improvement being proposed and this is the impacts, by knowing how wide and how long it's going to be and how it'll abut their property, to at least give them that indication to at least start the conversation. I don't know if that's it, you know, it's not the best answer, but I mean, at least you can walk down that pathway of like, this is the impacts, the intended impacts for this particular improvement, and start and go from there.
Okay. I just wanted to speak on, you were mentioning like what percentage of plans you should have. Just from the FDOT perspective, and just in agreement with Jason, we're not looking for 30% plans. Really at this stage, this is pre-application. We're only looking for you to really put the best draft application package as possible together for us to review in the meeting. So whatever is those requirements for you to submit your application, your best thorough internal vetting of your project that you want to submit for consideration, that's what should be, you know, that's the expectation for what to bring into the pre-application meeting. Also, you know, if an agency goes out and do 30% plans, and the project gets funded, it gets awarded, and it's now in the 5-year work program, it's gonna be, you know, a couple years out before you actually have funding designated for your design. And the department, we have to provide oversight of that. So those 30% plans are no longer valid at that time. So we wouldn't want you to put that much resources into 30% plans when you're gonna have to actually hire a designer later on and have DOT's oversight. But you should have somewhat of a concept plans, typical sections before and after for the department to review and assess.
If I can add some.
Yeah.
So that's a good point that you brought up. So so the application process, the first meeting with the agencies, we talk about the project, we identify the project, we talked about that. Oh, sorry. By the time that we get to the actual design, the project has probably gone through several stages to the point that it may look completely different to anybody within the community. So at that point, we'll go back to the community and have a public engagement process as part of the project. So the applicant or the community then sees the project changing. And so, and that's goes back to my point of when you first submit the application, having obviously, you know, the community, the city or the jurisdiction submitting the application has to have a clear, complete understanding of the project. But as you know, things change through the design process, the planning, there is discussions in the
Right.
community and all that stuff. So it's a very fine line, the way I see it. And I've been in those situations where you take the project through the steps, and then by the time you get to the point where you are, you know, you think as an engineer, as a planner, you think, okay, I got the project. You go to the committee, you go, we don't want that. That's one that you showed us before.
Well, it's
So that, you know, that's just, you know, my observation. Thank you.
yes, and we're aware of that, but it's very, and that's why we all, and when I say we, I'm talking about not only DOT, but the TPA collectively. It's important to stress the public outreach throughout the project, you know, from as early as you all, you know, pre-application stage to as the project it gets awarded, you know, if it's ranked and prioritized by the TPA, and then as well as once it's entered the 5-year work program and you're kicking off design, even past design going into construction, that public outreach has to continue throughout the life of the project so that the community understands, you know, what's really going on in their neighborhood. You know, they can see when it's starting, they can see when it's now being designed and now it's thought out a little bit. You know, it's more detail there. So they're learning and gaining that insight as you all go through the planning and design stage. And then even once it's in construction, you have a lot of communities or individuals that don't pay attention during the planning and design stage, but soon as ground breaks, now you have, you know, the community out there and they're stressing their opinions. Well, that's still a more critical time too, to continue to inform them and make sure they understand how they're being affected.
All right, we do have a virtual hand raised. Joanne? Joanne, are you there?
Or as an alternative, you might be able to type in the question if the audio.
Yeah, so if you're having some mic problems, you could always use the Q&A feature and type in the question, then we can have that read and potentially answer that for you. For the time being, is there any other questions?
I did want to mention from our previous conversation, though, that design funds aren't covered through the grant, and that it's only so that when you go through the design phases of the project, that's covered by the applicant, and all the funds that are being provided are only for construction and the reimbursement of CEI. That was somewhat of a recent clarification for local initiatives. As you can see on the graphic and the overview and throughout the presentation, in some areas, design funds come before the construction funds by a few years. So when you do the app, when you apply for funds, you're applying for construction funds, even though prior to construction, design is expected to be done a few years prior to that. And those design, that design element would be completed a few years prior to that, and it would all be done through local funds at the local's expense. And then the construction funds would be received a few years after that to actually construct the project. And previous, it indicated that we are covering design funds, which is not actually the case. And so I just wanted to reiterate that and clarify that point, that we are able to reimburse for CEI funds, the construction oversight funds during construction, but not the design funds themselves.
No, nothing in the Q&A? Okay. Okay. Any other questions online, in person?
Did we get a written question from Joanne or no?
We have not gotten a written question from Joanne now. Okay. Okay. All right. I guess with that, we could probably end it. Again, if actually, let me pull up the contact slide. If you have any questions for any of us, you can reach out to the program managers, like I mentioned earlier. So if you have questions about the State Road Modifications program, you can reach out to myself, Connor Campobasso, local initiatives, Jason Price. And then for transportation alternatives, you can reach out to Alyssa Frank. If you do have any, oh, we do have a question. Okay, great. Valentina?
Hi, does the pre-application meeting have to be scheduled in person or online?
That's a good question.
It could be done both.
Both ways?
You could have the option to attend virtually, or you could come into the office and schedule it that way. So through Calendly, when you go through and book your meeting, there will be two options. One, to schedule it virtually, which will provide a link to probably Teams or Zoom. We'll pick one of those. And that way, when you book the meeting, there'll be a link so we could all join virtually and review the plans and review what information you have for the project. You don't necessarily have to have anything, but if we do take the virtual route, we'll follow up and request any material in advance so we could kind of share that stuff amongst us, either by screen share or review it in advance, or in person. You could just bring whatever paper copies you'd like to, but there is an option for either virtually or in person.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Do we hear from Joanne? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you all being here, both in person and virtually. And we'll look forward to working with you soon.
Yes. Thanks for everyone for attending.